Hey people, it is Thursday, June the 26th. The time is 4:44 in the afternoon, and it's about 22 degrees Celsius and overcast. Maybe a tad humid, but certainly nothing compared to the weather in the several days before this, where it was a downright heat wave. So I'm glad temperatures have returned to something more sane. And I was just at the corner of Weston Road and Denison Road, and I'm heading east along Denison Road. I'm going to head to Jane Street, and then we'll take a walk north along part of the Jane Street corridor. This is a part of the city I've never recorded in before. I've recorded along Weston Road before, but not along the Jane corridor where we're headed. So this is in the part of the city which was once the borough of York and also the borough of North York. They sort of meet one another somewhere around this area. I'm not exactly sure where. In any case, we're far from downtown. I took the Up Express from Union Station to Weston Station and did a walk around the Weston neighborhood. And I thought, since I'm in the area, let's explore someplace I've never gone before. Because I think there's a pretty interesting stretch along Jane Street with some retail and restaurants. It's a part of the city that's sort of a hybrid between an old walkable pre-war neighborhood and a more suburban post-war neighborhood. It has elements of both, and you'll see what I mean. I think a train just passed overhead. It might have been an Up Express train. Sounded too short to be a GO train. And the Up Express ride was about 13 minutes, give or take a minute, from Union Station to Weston. The train moves quite quickly, so it covers a lot of ground in those 13 minutes, because it makes it all the way to Pearson in 25 minutes from Union Station. So the old town of Weston is a pre-war area that was its own small town. And the areas adjacent to the old town of Weston were developed much later. And that's the area we'll be walking through. There's a huge self-storage facility over there. And here we are coming upon Jane Street. For the first time on the channel, this part of Jane Street anyway. I have done walks through the Jane and Finch area, far north of here. And the southern end of Jane Street down by Bloor West Village. Alright, so there's a look south. There's a bridge going over the rail corridor there. But things get more interesting going north. So there's a large West Indian community in the area. Lots of these old post-war high-rise apartment buildings. And these sort of quasi-plazas that are built to the sidewalk like traditional old street-fronting retail, but have a lot of characteristics of a plaza at the same time. They oftentimes have a second story with apartments above the retail, just like on an old main street. But sometimes they also have a small row of parking in front of the building, which gives it more of a plaza sort of design. As I said, it's a bit of a hybrid here. I think this area started building up around the World War II time period and immediately after. With some older pockets here and there, such as Weston nearby. So a lot of the apartment buildings have retail on the ground floor. But Jane Street here is obviously a very wide and busy Strode-like thoroughfare. Also an extremely busy bus route, one of the busiest in the city. All in all, I'd say the area has more of a urban feel than suburban feel, maybe just a little. This part of the city also doesn't have a very good reputation, to be honest. It's thought of as a bit of a high crime area, much like Weston, right next door, and Mount Dennis just to the south. I think once we get up to Lawrence Avenue, things are a bit more interesting. There's a very much plaza building here. You can't mistake this. Lots of Caribbean and West Indian shops and restaurants. This one you can see all the way up to the new skyscrapers at Vaughan Metropolitan Centre, the new downtown of Vaughan, north of the city of Toronto. Basically a bunch of skyscrapers built in former suburban industrial wasteland, but it does have a subway station. And it is densifying at a rapid rate. Another plaza. Looks like that was a grocery store. Now it's a recycling center by the looks of it, or a second-hand store. Large thrift store. Jerk box. So some people might say areas like this are the real Toronto, which sort of implies that the downtown neighborhoods that I frequent more often on my channel are not the real Toronto. I mean, I think they're both the real Toronto. But I know what they're talking about. These are the parts of Toronto that you don't see, for the most part, unless you live here. Or maybe on the evening news. So as I mentioned before, unfortunately, this is a bit of a hot spot for crime at times. We got some more typical storefronts once we go north of Lawrence here. But then we have this big long plaza on this side with apartments above, though, as I mentioned. So very much a hybrid sort of development here. Of course, it would look much better if these were brought right up to the sidewalk and the parking was behind. But I don't think they were thinking that way when they were built. They wanted to make things as easy and convenient as possible for people in cars. But look how much better it looks across the street. No shortage of shops and restaurants, though. They're just jam-packed in here. And there are certainly a lot of people walking around also. Maybe not at this particular moment, but overall it's fairly vibrant in terms of pedestrian activity. And as I mentioned, the transit service is very frequent with the buses. You could hop on the Jane bus, it'll take you down to Jane subway station. or in the near future, the new station for the Eglinton Crosstown, which might be opening before the end of the year. A Mexican restaurant. Quite the car. I think I see Highway 401 up ahead. Not the prettiest area, admittedly. But not the ugliest either. Jane Pizza and Wings. Very old school Chinese restaurant. Here's John Street. This part of the city has street names that duplicate names in the old city of Toronto or in downtown Toronto, since parts of this area were a separate town at one time. Live bait. That's something you don't see too often. Well, I guess some people have to get it somewhere, even if they live in Toronto. People do fish in Lake Ontario. Some of these residential side streets are going towards the old town of Weston. Nice old historic homes. It basically got surrounded by post-war suburbia. King Street, another one of the old streets in Weston. You might have seen my walk through Weston actually before you see this video. I did the two videos back to back since I was in the area. The old town of Weston does have a very traditional looking downtown. Much more so than here along Jane Street. And Church Street. Whew. Feeling the humidity much more now. Still nothing compared to a few days ago. Heading to Jane Station. Crazy traffic here. It's because we're close to Highway 401. This bridge you see up ahead, though, is actually Black Creek Drive. Highway 401 is a bit further to the north. It's gridlock up here. Thursday rush hour. It's no joke. Used to have a green light. But check it out. You can sort of see why I don't do videos up in these parts of the city all too often. From a urbanist pedestrian point of view, they're not really the best areas. Especially once you get north of Highway 401, which we're very close to doing. And here's the Black Creek that the adjacent drive is named after. I feel like I'm in a bit of a no man's land now. I think Jane and Lawrence is probably the last sort of slightly urban, slightly interesting area as you head north up Jane Street. Definitely takes on much more of a Strode-like post-war look and feel once you get up to around these parts and continuing on. And that's in keeping with most of the city once you go north of Lawrence Avenue. It definitely feels more suburban, with a few small exceptions here and there. Now I see Highway 401 up ahead. There's the Falstaff apartments across the street. That's a bit of a rough neighborhood, those three buildings. Just like Jane Street as a whole, sort of considered a rough neighborhood, I guess, all the way from Lawrence up to Steeles, or at least to Finch anyway. Crazy traffic on the 401. And just north of the 401 is a small neighborhood shopping mall, the Sheridan Mall, I think. But I don't think I'll be able to check it out today, unfortunately. It's just north of Highway 401. And we are definitely in North York now, by the way. Solidly in North York. But I think we're going to start to wrap up the walk before we get to Highway 401, as we made our way from Weston Road and Denison over to Jane Street, and then a nice lengthy walk north up the Jane Street corridor, passing through a somewhat interesting area around Jane and Lawrence, and then up into a somewhat less interesting area, I guess you could say. But in any case, it was fun to explore an area I've never walked through before. I hope you enjoyed. leave a comment down below and then let me know your thoughts, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Also, be sure to hit that notification bell, that way you won't miss any of my videos. If you'd like to support the channel, there are links in the description where you can do so via PayPal, as well as via my merch store, and you can also support the channel by becoming a channel member, or by sending a super thanks if you prefer, as we look at Highway 401. And you can also find me on Instagram under K Continuum. So thanks for watching, and thanks to all the channel members. And be sure to keep checking back, because, as always, I will continue.